Hello and welcome to the 6 Plus show, a podcast for your wargaming and 40k needs. Hobby talk, tactics, tournament reports, lore and much more. We have it all. Please welcome your host for the evening, Tom.
Welcome, ladies, gentlemen and Ravenwing champions to that 6 Plus show. I am your host, Tom. It is extremely hot. It is oh so extremely hot. And we are all going to die. Joining me in the heat, we have Lee. Say hello, Lee.
Hello, Tom.
Ah, nice. Very good. How are you, Lee? What's up?
Yeah, I mean, it is the hottest day ever in the history of the United Kingdom. It's a struggle for all of us. So, yeah, we're just plowing on through.
Yeah, we're trucking. We're doing what we can. Doing what we can. And I'm also joined by our dear leader, Chris. Say hello, Chris.
Hello, Chris.
There we go. He stays true to form. Chris, what's new with you? How are you doing?
Creature of habit.
Yeah.
I am well. I am not enjoying the benefits of aircon, unlike Lee.
Oh, that's true. You'll notice I'm in a different room. That's because I recently went mad and decided to install air conditioning in my house. Big up East Air Conditioning, Jamie. Little plug for you there. I want a discount next time for that. But no, so I mean, it's still, I've only just turned it on, so it's still 27 in here, so it's still pretty warm.
First world problems.
It's coming down quickly.
Thought you wanted twin Volcon Contemptor, what you really wanted.
I've got plenty of those as well.
Excellent. Right, well, we don't really have any hobby progress to talk about, do we? Because we were all away this weekend doing gaming. So we will be chatting about what we've been doing. We went to the Northern Warlords Team Tournament, which was extremely exciting, and we had a very good time. If either of you have snuck out some hobbying in the interim, do let me know, but I certainly haven't. I downed tools. I haven't done any Warhammer.
We haven't done a podcast for ages, but
we haven't done a podcast for ages.
Really been
I
doing
think the only thing I've done is I've occasionally been doing some painting on some Chaos Space Marines. I bought the Kill Team sprue.
Oh, nice.
So I built those, and I don't remember if I'd mentioned that. So like the one with the Balefire Tome,
and that's
the
cool.
Demonic Sword, and the Heavy Chain Axe. So I've probably painted 6 of those for reasons that we'll come on to later, probably.
Yeah, very nice. Excellent. Okay. Well, I mean, I guess the best thing to do is recap what our team was, what the sort of environment was, and then get into the games and how we found it. I mean, Chris, do you have a sort of want to give an overview of the team and where we were at?
Yeah, sure. So this event was supposed to happen like a year ago, pre-COVID, and it's obviously got cancelled, so it got pushed back. So Jamie Clifford couldn't make it anymore. So dear old Tom stepped in to replace. So that meant our team was Lee with his Thousand Sons, Paul with his Dark Angels, myself, who obviously running Harleys at the moment, so Harlequins, and then Tom with his Drukhari. So we didn't have Tyranids, who obviously won the big bads, but other than that, and we didn't have Knights, who were in.
They were really present, weren't they?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say we learned a lot about the meta probably at the event, didn't we? Really, from watching what other teams were doing and how they were organised. But we certainly didn't go into it thinking, let's get 4 meta armies. Partly because Nephilim's only just out and we don't know what is exactly the best thing to do, and partly because we were keen to take stuff we were experienced with and keen to play. And I think that paid off for us in a number of rounds, didn't it? Having the experience and the know-how. So. Very nice, cool. So do you want to give a very brief outline of lists first, and then we can start thinking about the event itself?
Yeah, sure. So I took Light Harlequins, just a battalion.
Yep.
Pretty traditional list currently. Shadow Seer, Troop Master, and then 6 5-man units with the pistols, just so you can go around shooting things, in 5 Star Weavers. And then I took 2 individual Void Weavers and a Death Jester, just for some mortal wounds. And
lovely
then
to have
finally,
that's the Rift School Death Jester, right?
Yeah. And then finally, 3 units of 3 bikes. And the list is designed to play the same 3 secondaries, basically, R&D, behind enemy lines, and deadly performance. I took those in every single game, apart from one.
It's not mentally taxing, is it, when you know what you're going to do, which is great.
Rock up to the table. I've done my secondaries. Hurry up, mate.
And in terms
You're on
of
the clock.
In terms of Harlequins, obviously you've evolved from a dark into a light player in recent times, which makes lots of sense because dark got nerfed in various different ways and light are very good at the missions. But with your bikes, you've also moved towards bolus rather than glaives. Is that right?
Yeah, so when I was dark, the bikes could do work, especially at AP3. But now, the bikes just don't really do anything in combat. When you take a bike with 3, that's 12 attacks, 8 hits, strength 5. So even if you're wounding on 3s, like let's say 5 or 6 wounds, -2 AP and light, 5 up saves, 2 damage, killing up 3-4 Marines, if that. It's just, it doesn't do anything, right? Whereas the shooting, those 3 bikes, that's anywhere between 3 and 9 blast shots, which is strength 7 -3, 1 damage, and that's actually really useful into armies like Sisters.
Yeah, exactly. Really, really nice. I think it makes a lot of sense. And the bikes as melee pieces, they're always a bit variable outside of dark, as you say. So I think it's a sensible piece of tech for your list. And you've converted them so they have glaives and bolus, which I thought was it's a bit sacrilegious, but it does look all right. It does actually look all right.
Yeah, you just chop the end off, stick the bolus bit on the end, and they've got like dual wielding things, which only occasionally fall off. So.
Yeah.
So that was a very sort of flying, attacky, shooty, stabby list. And to complement that, we had another fly, shooty, stabby list, which was my Drakari. And this was sort of Raider and Venom Rush with Incubi. I had some Blood Brides. I was trying Blood Brides out again because the Witches went down a point. So I was curious to see where they were placed now. I had some Mandrakes and some Scourge for doing actions, I2 light R&D. But we also had some Grotesques, a couple of Ravagers, for the backfield to give me a bunch of Dark Lances. So it was quite a typical Drakari list. Had Drazar and Succubus and Archon as well. And it was sort of trying to play to the new mission secondaries, so it needed to be quick for engage, needs to go and take them alive, as a Drakari secondary is typically the one you have to pick because Drakari don't really have good faction-specific secondaries. And it's also good at R&D and banners, depending on what's called for. So those are our sort of, I guess, our attacky, offensy type lists. But then we also had 2 grindy, defendy, indubitable lists. Lee, what did you take? What was your defensive offering?
I took my 1,000 Suns, and trust me, I played them defensively. We'll get into that. So I took a very classic Cult of Duplicity double Terminator brick list. So Araman and Infernal Master, some rubrics, some cultists, 2 lots of 10 Scarab Occult, 5 Spawn, MVPs probably of the entire event, and the extra source was Magnus. So I took Magnus. I never take Magnus at anything, but I figured for a team event, actually, he does have a little bit of a niche. So that was the sort of added spice that I brought. I mean, secondary-wise, it's always planning on taking as many as it can from the Thousand Suns book. So in my head, I was always thinking of taking either Mutate or Interrogate, depending on which mission it was. It's generally quite good at scoring grind or no prisoners because sort of it just stands there and lets you invites onto it, and you just massacre anything when it gets within 18 inches, which is a lot of fun. Doesn't really expand like all the secondaries you guys just mentioned. I would never ever think to take like R&D, no. Engage, no. Binary lines, absolutely not. Because despite all the teleporting that you could absolutely do those things, but when you're coming into players that are actually sort of they're there to win, they're there to do well, they're not going to give you the opportunity to do that. So it's for me, duplicity is more about sort of finding an angle than it is trying to get in behind somebody, because realistically
it has a very distorting effect on how the opponent plays as well. Without even doing anything. I can vouch, having played into it many times, you play like a weirdo. You play with your pants down because you're worried.
So scared.
You're worried about what might happen, so you play strangely. So that's a nice effect to have without having to do that.
So much more defensive than you guys.
Yeah, very nice. And speaking of defensive, we also had Paul along for the ride. Now, Paul is very famous in our circles for running literally just Deathwing Terminators for the best part of, as far as I've known him, really. I don't have known
2 years.
I haven't really known Paul to run anything else. He was writing a Dark Harlequins list, but sadly they ceased to exist before he actually got that to table. But Paul is a very, very good pilot of Dark Angels and gets an excellent song out of them, but he's had to adapt his list for Nephilim, and the adaptation has involved bringing Ravenwing back into the fold, to complement. There's still a lot of Deathwing Knights involved. It's still Terminators.
Don't get us wrong. It's still almost entirely
Deathwing Knights, other Terminators. There's guys with Lightning Claws, Chain Fists, all sorts of stuff going on. But then to complement that, he's got Black Knights, who got a little points drop recently. So these are, elite plasma-toting bikers.
Really good backfield objective holders.
Apparently good backfield objective holders, yeah, which isn't what I would have thought they'd be, but it is a function they can serve. And he had the Ravenwing Champion on a bike. He has a really little techie assassin champion that he likes to use. And he also had an apothecary on a bike as well for healing, daisy chaining nightmares. So that was the team. It was a 4-player team event, which isn't that usual, I don't think. I think teams are often...
Team events aren't that usual. So,
no, team events aren't that usual either. No. 5s and 8s are quite common. And we definitely felt like we had a couple of quite defensive options. We had a couple of quite aggressive options. We had lists... or we certainly had several lists that can score well no matter how the game goes. Mine was not one of those, sadly. I don't. The Drakari simply aren't like that. They go big.
I think
or they
the
go
other 3
home.
lists were all good for that, weren't they? So
yeah, the other 3 lists were all. The Drakari are very much either they put you away or you put them away. That tends to be how they do.
Especially like the rest of us all felt. I think that in almost any game we were going to score 70 plus.
Yeah,
so absolutely. Our chance of getting at least a draw in the team format was always quite good.
Yeah, as we'll see, there were certainly some draws. So Northern Warlords, this is up in Manchester. It was quite a Shark Tank of an event, wasn't it? It's quite scary people.
It was, yeah. As we'll come on to.
Yeah, there's a lot of the national teams, or UK national teams, were using it as an opportunity to test things out. You had Welsh national players, Scottish national players, lots of English national players there. And then lots of regular tournament goers as well. Lots of people I knew from various events were there as well. So it was a strong crowd. And it was at Element Games, which I don't think any of us had ever been to before.
Paul had.
I hadn't. Paul had been.
Paul's not here, doesn't count. So how would we review that having been?
What, Element Games?
Yeah.
I really liked it.
Yeah, I liked it as well.
They were harshly done by based on the fact that it was 400 million degrees.
Yes.
But what it had was, I don't know if there was parking actually, because we had a hotel nearby. So that's normally the first thing I complained about if there's bad parking. So I didn't notice that. But what it did have was a nice big gaming store next to it. If you wanted to buy anything, that was cool. Didn't really actually look around it very much. Had nice displays, so you could go and look at models. The actual gaming venue, the hall, was quite big, and there was a bar inside, which always gets big points from me as well. And also, it was quite cheap as far as sort of bars go. Like
lunch provided.
Lunch was provided. That was amazing. We had these Subway platters, didn't we? Selection of sandwiches and crisps and stuff. Toilets were fine. I would say it's one of the best, if not the best, venue I've been to.
Nice.
I mean, I can't think of a better one. So right now, Element Games, I think that's getting my first place.
Yeah, I think it was really cool. I liked it a lot, and I'd like to go back, as you say, when it's not nuclear heat outside.
I was very sweaty and uncomfortable.
It was hot and sweaty.
That wasn't their fault.
That wasn't their fault. That was
that was the sun's fault.
I guess they're as complicit in global warming as we all are, but nonetheless, it wasn't
a rabbit hole we should avoid.
Wasn't their immediate fault. So it was an awesome venue, and we had 5 really interesting and demanding sets of games. But we got off to a nice easy start, didn't we? We got some plebs to begin with. Some chumps, some lemons. We got the pairings for round 1 the night before, and we were matched before even setting off on our 3-hour quest to get to Manchester. We knew we'd been matched into essentially a good chunk of the England team. I think captained by Josh Roberts, who is also England captain, I'm informed. And this was a team that had Josh Roberts. It had Alex Harrison,
Nathan Roberts. And Courtney
Nathan Roberts, and Courtney. And so these were some good players. These were people who'd all been in and around the England team. Some of them were still very much in and around the England team. And we knew this was going to be a tough set of ties. So Chris, you were obviously on pairings duty as our brave leader. How do you feel these pairings went? What were the ins and outs of the pairings process here?
Yeah, so I guess when you know your pairings up ahead, you can kind of run through everything. So Paul and I spent quite a long time in the car chatting, and then we rang you, and we put in a lot of thought, and we kind of identified that we thought they would lead with the Knights.
Mm-hmm.
And we identified that we wanted to put Paul as Dark Angels into Blood Angels. And if we couldn't get that, we would try and get Paul into Knights, or we would get the Harlequins into the Blood Angels. And then we'd hope that, we could, like, maybe Lee could deal with Thousand Suns, Tom could deal with Orcs or something like that. But we went through all the scenarios. We believed they were going to lead with Knights, and then they would put Orcs and Nids into our defender, which would be Dark Angels. That was our prediction. And they did lead with Knights, but they gave Paul the opportunity to go into Blood Angels or Orcs. We're like, well, we reckon Paul takes Orcs, but the plan was go into Blood Angels. What do we do? And Paul was up for the Blood Angels. So he went Blood Angels.
He was very keen for the Blood Angels. He was keen.
Full credit to Paul. He's always game for anything, isn't he?
Every round he was like,
absolute champion.
Bring on.
It transpired afterwards that Josh Roberts was keen for Paul as well, because he wanted to practice playing into Dark Angels, because he knows he's going to be made to plplay into Dark Angels a lot, because it's a good counter to Blood Angels. He was also well up for it.
Exactly, and that's it, because Knights played into Harlequins, Alex Harrison, because he wanted to play into Harlequins. Harlequins were a bad matchup, and he just wanted to play into it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of how it worked. So Harlequins went into Knights, Blood Angels, Dark Angels. Tom's Drakari went into Orcs.
Yep, Orcs.
And Lee got the joys of Tyranids.
Yeah, first round Tyranids. I was very excited about that.
What sort of Tyranids was it? Was it like a Leviathan type?
Yeah, it was full Leviathan, Murderous Hive Tyrant, 2 lots of 9. Warriors,
that one.
2
It was that
Harpies.
list. That list. I got that list later on.
Yeah, I think it's as good of a Tyranid list as you can make. Piloted by someone who's very, very good.
Slightly alarming signs for Tyranids, right? I think if the army starts essentially just circling around spamming warriors, that's not a good sign.
Yeah, that's true.
That once that gets hit, it's an interesting to think about where they go.
So I always knew going into that it was going to be tough.
Very tough.
Doesn't sound really like Tyranids because they outnumber us, and they sort of can do an equivalent mortal wounds sort of spectrum back to us, which we also really hate.
So I think with our sort of summaries of the rounds and the battles, we're going to try and keep it brief, but we're each sort of keeping an eye on one to go into more depth on. I think that's right, Chris.
Yeah.
Sweet. Okay, so we'll just flag up if it's one we're interested in going into depth on. Paul lost narrowly to Josh Roberts' Blood Angels. I think it wasn't a huge margin, but it was a loss, and that's a great effort from Paul.
He made it closer. He felt like a 4-inch charge or something.
Yeah,
which would have made it a lot closer. So I think he felt he'd played the game well. He lost by like 20 points or something.
Yeah, excellent. And that's
which in this is how does that equate?
Like a 14-6 or something, maybe.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it's a very good showing against a very good player, so Paul should be very happy with that. How did you get on, Chris?
So I took not Deadly Performance. I took Bring It Down because he had 2 big knights and like 4 or 5 little knights. Mm-hmm. And I played into Chaos Knights twice, where I scored Bring It Down well. I played into Imperial Knights once, where I scored like an 8 on it or something. My concern going into with Deadly Performance is, I can put stuff in their deployment zone. I'm pretty much never killing 2 things. Can I take objectives? It's actually really hard to take objectives off the Helverins because they're 5 models. So you can't just steal objectives with 5 troop or whatever. Yeah. Very quickly, it just became clear that I couldn't kill him. Round 1, I killed 1 Helverin, and that was it. I did not kill another model the rest of the game. Mm-hmm. The problem is he's got 4 up in Vun, -1 damage across the board. And I think I kind of got tabled turn 5 and I lost by like 35 points or something like that. It was like 90-55.
But again, top player, top list, right? So that's no shame in that. I think I'm interested because Imperial Knights were clearly one of the breakout stars of this event. They were very popular. And it does
look
look
like... He
like...
missioned so well. He just chose 3 secondaries, which I couldn't interact with. He
they
just had
seem
to do
be
things, and he
set up to score enormously high, pretty much just occasionally foraying into the middle, but otherwise holding their ground and just shooting you to shit, which is what Imperial Knights want to do. So that's a really interesting one, and they seem to be very well equipped for Nephilim. It's made them better, they were sort of in the low to mid 50s win rate wise at the end of Nightmond, and it'll be interesting to see where they fall now, because they're very good. The Knights players are very excited about it, aren't they?
Yeah, well, Alex was saying his list is designed at WTC just to go into everyone, really. Also, he was saying that he went into Harley's, but my list in particular wasn't the one he was really worried about. He's worried about that 9.
Oh, yes. Boats, as it's known. Yep.
Yeah, boats. Fusion. I just didn't have enough. But yeah, like Knights are... I haven't worked out how to beat it with my current iteration yet, but as you say, Alex...
No, yeah, I'd be interested to see how I got on. I think are they a bit easier to kill in combat, but I've got to get there, which isn't an easy thing. Yeah. So no, an interesting one. I guess it's worth saying as well at this point, the terrain was really good here, right? This was fantastic. This was WCT terrain. It was bordering on dense on some of the boards, but the angles were clever. I thought the setups were really clever. It made minimizing damage turn 1 pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
If you went second, but it didn't make getting to and getting stuck into the enemy straightforward. I felt it wasn't like you can literally have your whole army set up ready to jump.
No. It was a nice balance.
You didn't have those sort of...
I really liked it.
Stepping stones.
The UKTC one.
No, definitely. I thought it was a really cool setup. How did the game against the Leviathan Warrior Bricks go, Lee?
Yeah, I mean, again, I chose secondaries that allowed me to score points, so I foolishly used the laminate card that they give you rather than writing an ITC battle, so I can't remember exactly what I took. It was definitely Interrogate, which I was able to score well on. A couple of others. I think it was a 17-4 loss in the end, so fairly heavy, but not quite the full 20-0. Ultimately,
that adds up to 21. So,
sorry,
that adds up to 21. 17-4 loss.
So in that territory,
yeah, something like that. Yeah, I don't know exactly how.
How was the Nids list played? Was it did he push forward very aggressively with
push the Harpies? No, actually, it was quite defensive again. So the only things that sort of came at me early on were. So I guess I went first, which I didn't want.
Nice, yeah.
So that was a part of the issue. So then he just didn't really have to bring anything forward that much. He sort of skirted around the outside of the board with a number of... he had the new character model and a load of warriors basically come down one side. And there's just so much there with the parasite. That's right. So with the warriors with their 3 wounds and their toughness 5 and their transhuman and their -1 damage and their 5 up feel no pain, it's just like, well, I'm not getting through that. And I just didn't get through it. And eventually they just got swarmed by. I think I killed the Harpies, 1 squad of the warriors, and that was kind of it.
Still a decent showing. Yeah, definitely a decent showing.
Yeah.
That is at least part of the path to victory, but it's just that there's still so much more stuff even after you've done that.
Yeah, exactly. I think what really surprised me, that's the first time sort of playing Tyranids in anger in the new edition. And I was he had all his, big characters at the back, and then he's like, so from here, I'm going to smite you even though you're 45 inches away. And then I'm going to do this, and this. I'm like, well, I've just taken like a load of mortal wounds or whatever, a load of like debuffs. And I just, to be honest, I didn't really know how it worked in that sense.
No, well, this isn't something that you see, what I would say is casual Nids players do. You don't tend to see it. The chaining isn't easy to set up or remember.
It was funny because he was like, I'm really sorry for what I'm about to do because it's really stupid, but that's the rules and I have to play them. And I'm like, you do what you got to do. So no, it was a great game, played in good spirits. We did catch up after because I always like to ask my opponents when they're really good players, like, did you see any sort of glaring mistakes so I can learn from it? And he was like, no, to be honest, you just didn't really have a chance. I was like, cool.
I think that's the way. No, that is the way.
He was better than me anyway. Let's not get past that.
Well, yeah. But I mean, it's an excellent list. Cool. And I had Courtney in our game. Our game was quite fun because he had Gazgul and wagons and stuff, and he took the centre very aggressively. But I had the speed to get around and battle for the flanks. And we looked like we were on for a draw for quite a while, and it was actually a very generous, spirited game. Courtney, I don't think, was practicing for WTC or anything like that, so he was quite relaxed. I don't think he's going along, so he was in more jovial mood than some of them. We were having quite a lot of fun with it. But I had a disaster where on both the far flanking objectives, a single orc boy survived from a 10-pack. I was trying to kill in 2 places, and they both rolled 1 on their morale. He had no CP for leadership, but they both passed leadership in both quarters. And I was like, that really hurts, because primary-wise, that was a big swing for him, and then it completely fucked me for my turn as well, because he got the 12 swing, and then he just got them both out of trouble and held it with the offset on both sides. So it was a massive moment in the game. I think that was the fatal moment. I think Courtney probably played it better than me, and my Ravagers just didn't want to wound anything, didn't want to hurt these orc vehicles to get them open in time. We were both playing like transport Russian dolls. There was a fun moment where Makari charged into 3 witches and got killed by them. That was good. Yeah, it seems about right. He's a grot, but he did the Shadowfield thing and just failed his save. So it was a really lovely game, really, really good, really positively spirited. But Courtney took, I think it was like 88-66. Yeah. And that the disaster in the 2 corners was probably the fatal moment in the game. But actually, Orcs also have good secondaries now. They score very nicely on their secondaries. I think if you run them with Gazgul, they've got a nice set of tools that sort of force you to chase them all around the board, trying to stop them doing it in ways that feel kind of counterintuitive when you're playing them. It's cool. I'm looking forward to seeing if people can cook some interesting stuff up with Orcs.
Oh, for sure.
Awesome. That was our round 1.
So we lost round 1, basically.
We did lose round 1. How heavy? I mean, I don't know how these things work. Is it aggregate? How do they...
Yeah, it was an aggregate. So in theory, the worst you could have done was lose 80-0.
Yeah.
So obviously it has to add up to 80. So I'm not sure what it ended up as. Maybe like a 70-10 or a 65-15 or something. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, very nice. Cool. And so that took us on to round 2. Round 2. What was the team that we were up against? I can't remember their name now. They were
Northern Warlords.
Team. They were Northern Warlords guys, weren't they?
They were lovely guys, or at least my opinion was.
Yeah, no, they were
really, really nice guys. Really, really nice guys. So how did pairings play out for this one, Capitan?
I think this one actually went really well. It felt like we kind of got it right, and every single one of us were happy. They had Chaos Knights, they had Tyranids, they had Sisters, and they had World Eaters.
Yeah.
So obviously, the idea is we kind of identify potentially who in our list wants to avoid people or that sort of thing, and then we can lead with them. So I think we led with Lee.
Yeah, we did this time.
In that game. And he had the choice of Tyranids or World Eaters.
Yes, he did.
And we said, Lee will be nice and you can have the World Eaters.
Lee having just had the Tyranids. Because actually there's that layer to it in teams, isn't there, where it's like, well, I got shafted last time. It's someone else's turn. Although this Tyranids list wasn't quite as horrifying as the Leviathan Brit.
No,
it was one of those games that I think with the World Eaters, it was that any of us could have played that game. It's just that I think my other matchups into the others were worse than yours.
Yeah.
Exactly, which is kind of what you have to do.
And you were kind of interested, weren't you, to see new World Eaters in action?
Well, yeah, I'm a big Chaos player, so it's the first time I've been I haven't used a new book, so I thought someone else can use it into me, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so there was that. I can't remember. I think, did they leave with Chaos Knights and we gave them Paul?
Gave them Paul, didn't we?
Yeah, Paul
it was you or Paul, I think. Oh, no, yeah, Paul or me, and they went with Paul.
They chose Paul, so Chaos Knights into Dark Angels, Tom's Drakari into Nids, and then I had the Sisters, which I'm fine with because I played Sisters so many times now. I kind of know how they function. He had the standard list, so I was kind of like, yeah, this is fine.
That was probably the harder one. Probably the harder one of the 4.
Yeah.
In terms of it's new and it's exciting and it's got good secondaries right now. So that was the captain taking on the big fish.
I'll take it for the team. It's fine.
Yeah. So should we start with that? How did that game go?
Yeah, so I played against Simon. Played against Simon. an older guy. He was lovely, like just such a nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was quite slow. Like deployment took quite a while. He was quite forgetful. He said he had long COVID, so I think that was maybe a bit of an effect.
Okay, we'll let him off then.
Yeah, we absolutely will.
But he was genuinely just so lovely. We had a great game. It was data scry salvage, so diagonals. So it's always an interesting one, isn't it? Because you kind of don't want to try and play across all the objectives.
Yeah, I love it as a mission. It's so brutal. It's
and
horrible.
It's hold 2, hold 3. And the thing with the sisters is they have lots of good trading pieces, and they score their secondaries really well. So he's got Leap of Faith, which means he can just basically gets points for using miracle dice. So he's always going to max that at 12. Defend the Shrine, basically pick an objective in no man's land, hold it at the end of the turn, you score it.
That's the easiest stranglehold ever, isn't it?
If you don't hold it at the end of the game, -3 points. But yeah, very easy. I can't remember what the other one was, but it was like quite an easy one to score. So yeah, I kind of went first, pushed down the flank. I was able, over the course of the game, I was able to bait him out and therefore not allow his Repentia to trade, which was really the big thing because he had 3 Repentia missiles, 2 Zephyrim squads. And about turn 3, I was 50-30 up, feeling pretty confident. My game had gone on longer than everyone else's.
We'd all finished, hadn't we? Yeah.
We'd all finished. We knew he'd won. Spoiler alert, sorry. And I was like, well, we could try and talk it out. The problem was we probably had slightly different opinions on how the game would go.
Yeah.
He was doing that classic, well, I'm going to kill this unit here. And I'm like, yeah, but
obviously I'm going to kill that. You can't say that about Harlequin's units, though, can you?
They can't.
Sadly, you really have to roll them out.
If we go back through the last 3 turns, Simon, those things haven't really happened. So I was kind of like, it's fine. We totaled it up as like an 82, 84, 80 win to me, which counts as a draw, obviously.
Yeah. I guess you knew it didn't matter.
Yeah, I knew it didn't matter, so I wasn't that fussed. Probably in hindsight, we should have just said there's too much stuff left on the board. Still 2 turns to go. We're just going to have to call it there and say it's 50-30.
I agree. That's what you should have done.
But, it didn't matter. And he'd been really nice and we'd had a nice time. But, no, I was happy with how I played the game.
Great.
I certainly, the first 2 turns, I had to think about like what to trade and that sort of thing. But I was able to bait out the Repentia, and I thought I made some good moves and stuff. So I was satisfied with how I played. But it was a shame it was a draw and not a win for me. But they score so well, it's just always going to be hard, I think.
Yeah, I think they're very hard to put away now.
So that was me.
Wonderful. Lee, do you want to get it?
Yeah, so I had the World Eaters. I remember taking Psych Interrogation again. I think it was, again, no prisoners because he had lots of berserkers. He had lots of cultists. I think I got 13 on that, so I managed to effectively wipe everything. And what happened in that game really was I went first. I had forward deployed some rubrics, so I was in a good place for hold 2, hold 3, and I just hid them behind a wall. And then apart from that, I did the thing that I did for most of my games. I didn't do anything. I just stood still and said, I can score points quite accurately just from standing here. And you can come to me, which I know you want to do. So what I did do was I basically stood still and I popped 1 Rhino with Terminators. And then loads of Berserkers fell out. 2 died on the disembark, which was really unfortunate.
Classic.
And then he then in his turn, he sort of staged himself, moved up. And in my turn, I just obliterated everything else. It was quite a short game. He was a lovely guy. We had a couple of beers as well, which was nice after that pounding I got in the first game. There wasn't really too much to say about it. I felt I was relatively in control most of the game. Wasn't super impressed by the World Eaters, unfortunately, which is a shame because they're very, very cool. Definitely had some real tricks in the list. So the Demon Prince he had was absolutely ferocious. He got very, very unlucky sending it into Magnus, actually. Who miraculously survived like 7 out of 8 4-ups on D3 plus 3 damage. It was unbelievable. And then immediately splatted the Demon Prince in return, which actually was a shame because that stopped me from getting the 20-0 because then I couldn't interrogate his characters anymore because there was nothing left. So I was just going to run like dancing around for that, like because I moved 16. I was just going to move and advance away every single time, but couldn't quite do it. But yeah, good game, lovely guy. I think it's just a case that I know that he didn't want to play into the Thousand Suns, and I can see why. He's got no psychic defense.
Yeah.
So as soon as anything comes down, and they're still quite expensive models, points wise, and you drop a Doom Bolt down, and then you do an extra D3 more wounds, and then you do a Super Smite, and then you know all this stuff, and it's just like, well, I've just killed an entire 200-point squad with almost no effort. He never had a real chance against that, unfortunately. He did say that they had accidentally made it so that he played me, and that wasn't the intent. And I think into one of the other lists, like he actually quite fancied himself into any of the other lists actually, because he's like they also want to get stuck in, whereas he knew that I could just sit back and
they do. I
don't have to come to me eventually. I just kept moving back until I couldn't go any further, and by that point, it was fine.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was a tough one for him because he's doomed into the headlong charge, isn't he? Just hoping he gets there to find out all his weapons are -2 AP.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, armor content really hurt him in that game.
Yeah. And now Paul, Chaos Knights, how did he get on with the Chaos Knights in this game?
So yeah, whenever I was looking over, it was always super tight. Paul fancied himself into the Chaos Knights. But I mean, Paul fancied himself into literally everything.
Paul fancies himself into anything you put in front of him.
Yeah, but he just wants to punch up, doesn't he? He just wants to punch up.
Yeah.
And so he managed to get the draw. He got a draw. It was really close the whole time. Yeah. And he drew into them.
So that's a good defender's task, isn't it? If you're taking something aggressive like Chaos Knights and blunting it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very nice. Then I had Barry. Barry was the Tyranids player, and he was running Kraken, and he had lots of Gene Stealers and a Broodlord up front. The Hive Tyrant, the one, the Reaper of Obliterax and the Wings, that guy. And then big monsters, some of the big monsters, Exocrines, Trigons, a Trigon Prime, and a Tyrannifex. Now, I was up for this list because it's lots of big monsters, which means I can bring it down, which means I can focus on killing stuff without worrying about my secondary score. But they take a lot of killing, these big Nid monsters. They are absolute bastards. They are huge.
Oh, they are now, yeah.
They are tough to get through. I mean, generally in this game, it's Data Scry, as we said. It's got the really brutal primary where you're sort of trying to fight over the middle and hold the middle, and it's really easy to get pushed off. Really, really easy to get pushed off. And I think with Barry and I, first turn was always going to be big, and I had first turn and just basically put Barry's Nids in a headlock all game whilst killing the monsters one at a time. And that was about it. Really, the Hive Tyrant got isolated. I don't know whether Barry misplayed him or whether, I think with Overrun you have to kill the thing that you've attacked.
Yeah, you do. Yeah,
he left one Blood Bride alive on one sort of the Secretary is just the only one left in contact with the Tyrant. So the Tyrant had come over to kill them because I'd used them quite aggressively to kind of draw his stuff out. And so the Tyrant was then stuck out in front with Drazar not very far away. So Drazar just punched the Tyrant's head off in my turn, which was very enjoyable. And then Drazar did later get Drazar. So Drazar killed a Hive Tyrant, an Exocrine, and then finally took a Trigon down to 1 wound and then didn't make it, and then the Trigon killed him. So he almost went for 3 bucks. He was really up for it, and then he didn't quite make it. But Barry was an absolute gent. This was a massacre in terms of the score, just because he never really got out once I'd pushed him off the middle. I had the middle all game and he didn't. So it was a 20-0. But a really good, enjoyable match and very funny and lots of silly moments as the various stabby elves chase down these monsters. So thanks, Barry. Excellent. Right. Round 3. What do we hit round 3?
So we're sitting there 1-1. It's so often the case we're hunting at 2-1 on day one dream.
Yeah.
And we come into Carrying Capacity Exceeded or something like that.
Yeah, that was their name. Yeah.
They were good.
As much as we got the pairings process right in the last game, we got it wrong in this one.
Yeah, this was a learning curve for us, wasn't it?
So they had Harlequins, which was 8 boats, 9 troops.
Boats.
They had
possibly the least interesting list in 40k. I reckon it's well up there. It's well up there. It's horrific. It's so scary.
They had Deathwing Terminators, 40 of them. Yeah. They had Slanesh Demon, or just demons, with a tasty surprise.
There's a surprise, guys. Hold on. It looks like Keeper of Secrets Rush with Bellicor, but there's more to it. Yeah.
And then there was
Admech.
Admech, yes.
Admech, yeah.
Featuring a guy who hadn't played much recently. And
yes, which I think is where their carrying capacity name came from.
Yeah,
I think they were being a bit mean to him.
Yeah. So yeah, we kind of, if we look at this objectively, what we want is Lee to play into the Deathwing Terminators because he's got the best chance of killing them before they can score too highly.
Yeah.
We don't want Drakari or Harlequins into their Harlequins.
No.
We don't know what plays into Slaneshi Demons, really.
I'd give it a go. I think I'd give it a go. And you also could give it a go because you can stand off it for long enough.
And we don't really care what goes into Admech, whatever's left over. As it is, we got it wrong. I can't remember how. We led with me, didn't we?
We either led with... Yeah, I think we led with you.
We led with me, and I ended up going into the Dark Angels, which wasn't ideal. The worst thing was that Tom went in. The way we paired it was that Tom took out the Harlequin so that three of us would win. Paul was confident into demons. He'd played lots of demons before and always won. I was like, well, I'm going to be able to give the Deathwing a run around. Lee can beat the Admech, and that will kind of be fine. We'll get 3 wins, 1 loss, and that'll be us done in the round.
Yeah, that was the hope, right? That was
the
way the pairings playing out. That was the plan. Yeah,
it just didn't quite work that way.
Yeah, so we'll do the Harlequins one first because this is a nice quick one. Drakari Harlequins is not a good matchup for Drakari at all. It is the reason you don't see many top guys on Drakari right now because they're all playing Harlequins because they know what happens when Drakari hit Harlequins. And what happens is you chase them around trying to hit them with all your lovely AP that you've invested heavily in doing literally nothing for the entire game because it serves no purpose and you can't hit them and you can't catch them. Dylan knew this because Dylan had played Drakari for most of the season before switching to Harlequin. So Dylan was very much a man after my own heart. I've been on the same journey as Dylan. We had a very fun, enjoyable game. I did make tons of 6-up saves early on, which was very funny and was really winding him up, which I thought was hilarious. It's like, come on, buddy. Come on. I'm allowed a few 6-up inruns. You've got a lot of very nice defences. Let me have my 6-up inrun every now and again. There were a few really funny bits of luck. I left the succubus died getting out of a transport, which was great because she stayed there a turn and then the boat died and then she died. There are a few bits of back and forth in the middle, and the Blood Brides got massacred by Star Weavers. They went in and tied some Star Weavers up to try and stop them from all just running off and shooting next turn. And then the little attacks from the Star Weavers, I just failed every 4-up I took. So I think I literally had like 2 of them left from the 10 pack from their efforts to fight the Star Weavers. So that was fun. So that was a massacre. It was 17-3 to Dylan. I think the really nice Harlequin secondaries very much showed through here. And it was much more of a struggle for me to execute my game plan. I was pretty much pushed off the table by about 4, I think.
Yeah, so not a good start.
No, but that at least we kind of expected. I think we kind of knew that was coming, right?
So as long as the other 3 of us did our job, it was fine.
Yeah.
So Paul was playing into Shalaxi Hellbane.
Mm-hmm.
Be'lakor.
Yeah.
Keeper of Secrets.
Yeah. There's 3 keepers and Shalaxi and Be'lakor. Yeah.
And
dun, 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 dun.
Abaddon.
He was hidden nicely and no one spotted him.
Apparently he was at the top of the list. But we in our haste, and this always happens mid rounds, doesn't it? Where you're checking stuff much more quickly and a lot more stuff sort of slides by.
Like, I recognise that style.
Yeah, that's what that was. And to be fair, we just mistook it for the version of this it would have been, a few months ago. But Abaddon really changes that matchup if you're Paul, right? Because Paul
can't kill him. He's got no chance.
Can't kill him. Paul isn't going to get a chance to kill him until he is literally cutting Paul's head off, and then he's going to need every bit of phasal damage he's got just to deal with him, whilst also dealing with 4 fucking huge monsters and Be'lakor. And also I think there were a couple of fiends in there, little sneaky fiends for tying up. Demonettes. And by all accounts, the lad playing the demons is an excellent demons player as well. So this was a hard day.
Yeah, they're saying he's one of the top players.
This is a hard day for Paul, and I can only assume that Be'lakor's no invuln sword went off and took some Terminators out as well, made a mess. So it was a matchup we now know isn't Dark Angels friendly.
So that wasn't ideal. That kind of went against it, which meant then that Lee and I had to get big blowout wins. So Lee, did you manage the big blowout win?
I did win my game. And it was a fairly comfortable win, actually. So I went into Admech. Luckily or unluckily for me, I've played Admech a lot of times, obviously, because Chris, you were around for a long time. And since then, Admech have been nerfed a fair few times, and Thousand Suns have received either no nerfs or some very indirect buffs. So Armor of Content was not a thing then. It is now. And then with Nephilim as well, some of the ways that Thousand Suns are generating CP and playing the mission is quite strong as well. So I felt quite confident going into this. What was interesting, and I haven't really covered this yet, is on this terrain, it was so big that for the first time in my entire life, Magnus could start on the board and hide behind it, even versus Admech.
Wow.
Which is absolutely unbelievable. So I did sign on the board, and there's a reason why I'm bringing that up is because it was Magnus was generally disappointing the entire event. I haven't really gone into that too much yet. But as a general thing, he didn't do much. However, in this game, he had this really interesting psychological effect. So he had my opponent had 6 Iron Striders, and he had them set sort of far back into his corner. And every turn, he would measure out how far Magnus could get and say, "Well, I won't come out then." I'm like, great, because I'm scoring points without using it. You're not scoring points without using them, because my Terminators, the only thing that's going to kill my Terminators in this list are those Iron Striders, and he was too afraid to use them. So how the game went really was that he had this 2 blocks of 20 Rangers or Vanguard, I don't remember what the difference is, a load of Infiltrators and Rust Stalkers, and then some characters, and then those Iron Striders. So I know from experience that the buffs, he knows that all my guns are AP2, all my bolters. And I think, well, he's going to put those bolters, he's going to make those bolters be wasted by putting the ignore AP1 and 2 buffs on those Rangers or Vanguard, whatever they were. And I'm like, well, that's fine.
It's all the same. It's all just 2-up saves.
Yeah, exactly. I've got the same. I've got the problem. He's got the problem that I've got 2 squads of Terminators, both of which are perfectly capable of eliminating the other squad. So he's like, okay, well, I'll go defensive with this one. And I'm like, okay, well, I've also got these Soul Reaper cannons, and the Thousand Suns have Soul Reaper cannons, which is strength 6, so they're winning on 2s now. They're AP3, and then the real secret sauce I never get to use. It's always very satisfying. It's always against Admech that I get to do it. There's a stratagem called Soul Reap, and when you do it, you get you can double the number of shots if your opponent's unit has more than 11 models in it. So 2 Terminators bring out 20 strength 6 AP3 shots. So I would buff one up. So I was hitting on 2s or getting full rerolls from Magnus. So Magnus was just there buffing, giving things command phase buffs and then psychic buffs. Launch the Terminator and just wipe an entire squad a turn. And then in return, he would launch his Rust Stalkers or Infiltrators or whatever the fighty ones are into the Terminators. Think, I'll kill some of those, kill 2, and then on the turn, my 8 Terminator would immediately get rid of all 9 of his, and that happened 2 or 3 times, and then it was kind of like, okay, well, I think we're about done here.
Nice.
Unfortunately, he was a good enough player. I just think ultimately a little bit paralyzed by Magnus, and then sort of realizing that he had to step into the middle and just didn't have the tools anymore. Admech are not quite killing enough to get rid of all those Terminators. Just because of that 2-up save with +1 against damage 1, and there's a lot of damage 1 in Admech. And then ignoring 1 because of Armor Contempt as well. So it was, in the end, it was fairly comfortable for me. I think I've probably had the nicest round of anybody.
Very good work. Very good work.
So we've got one good win back, so we now need to get the final good win back. The problem was that I was playing into Deathwing Terminators. Now, for those of you who know anything about Deathwing Terminators, you'll know they have a relatively simple game plan, which is we're going to walk across the board slowly, scoring points, and you're not going to kill us very quickly.
No.
And therefore, they're going to score like 80 or 90 points. The end. Which obviously makes trying to get a big blowout win really hard. It's just, can you kill them quick enough?
Nigh on impossible.
And, I go second. If I go first in this game, I can at least fire my bikes across, pin his 10 Deathwing Terminators in his deployment zone, and slow them down, and then make their ascent to the middle of the board really slow and stop him from starting to score his Stubborn Defiance. What in fact happens is he goes first, rolls a 6 on the advance, and those 10 Deathwing Knights those Knights are just sat in the middle of the board for 5 turns. Like, excellent.
The party has started, yeah.
So he had 10 in the middle, 10 on one flank, 10 on the other, 5 in his backfield, 5 in Deep Strike. So obviously I only had really one option, which was to send the majority of my army around one flank. Turn 1, killed 6 Terminators. He didn't do anything in response. Turn 2, I killed the rest of that unit, the 2 command squad guys. He deep struck down his 5 Terminators right by my deployment zone. And yeah, the game was just me whizzing around most of my army around one flank. His Deathwing Terminators doing literally nothing in the middle. Or the Knights, the actual other 10-man Terminators in the far corner just sat on that objective, planting bombs. I think I lost about 4 bikes whole game or something. I just wasn't dying, but obviously it just takes a while to kill the Terminators. And he had the primary early on, but once I removed 1/4, I was fine. I had my Void Weavers and a couple of other things dealing with the 5 Terminators in my backfield. I was never going to be able to get a big win, and it finished 94-90 to me. So it was a draw.
It's just not a list that you can often massacre, is it? It's just the nature of it. It takes a set of very specific circumstances and luck. Yeah, it's just one of those armies where you need the luck. As soon as you get the winning on 4s, that's.
And he did all the right things. He stuck with models in cover, and I thought he might be a bit more exciting with his Deathwing Knights, but no, they literally Stubborn Defiance in the middle. He just wanted to play the mission.
Yeah, that's their dream, man. That's their dream. And if you come in and they'll bash you with hammers. Yeah.
How do we think that game would have gone? How that round would have gone? How we switched the pairing? So let's say that I've got into the Terminators.
I think there's a combination. I think there's a combination.
You reckon you get a bigger win? Because you can just deal with the middle.
Magnus would absolutely love them so much.
Yeah, I could still kill. I could still beat Admech.
Yeah.
And then that would be fine. So that would have then turned it. That probably would have made the game really close. Obviously, then another change would be something like pull into the Admech, maybe immune to demons, or pull into, I don't know what, well, maybe pull into their Harlequins.
Well, yeah, pull into the Harleys would have had the exact same effect, right? I don't know what the combinations were. Maybe they'd set themselves up so that wasn't possible. I don't remember. But yeah, and yeah, so it was definitely one where we felt afterwards that we hadn't quite got the combinations and choices right, wasn't it? But that was a learning experience, and I think this was probably the game that was the swing difference, I reckon, between our overall final placing, as we'll discuss later on, and we've learned some stuff, so I think we'd be better placed if we went into that tie again. Excellent. Right, we then went to the hotel, where it turned out we didn't have hotel rooms. Thanks very much, Jamie, for that.
Some of us did.
Some of us did, and I had to do all sorts of unspeakable things so that Lee would let me stay in his room. So it all worked out okay, and we had a nice meal, and then we fell asleep very quickly because we were knackered. And then the next day,
Paul didn't.
No, sorry, Paul. Gutted.
Yeah, sorry, Paul.
Took one for the team again, and then
the
next morning, the first thing in the morning, we had a really funny moment because we'd been discussing the pairings in some detail for the team we thought we'd been matched into. And then we get into the room and we go to the tables near where we think we're supposed to be, and these lads just come up to us, and they are very, very relaxed, jovial, casual players, and they just randomize all of their cards.
They just literally shuffle them and
slam a first defender down and go, off you go. And we're like,
how do we deal with this?
This doesn't seem right. And then we eventually discovered that we weren't matched into them, and indeed that our original pairing was also gone, and we were matched rapidly into a new set of people, weren't we? So we had
Animosity.
Who were, I think, in the main, Geordie. I think there was some Newcastle
My guy was
accents.
Definitely Geordie, yeah.
Yeah, some Newcastle accents in among there. So
my guy was originally from Cambridge area.
Well, there we go. Yeah.
Geordies of the East Anglia.
Yeah.
And we, I think we were pretty happy with our pairings for this, weren't we? We were pretty content.
Yeah. So their lists, they had an Eldari Craft World list with like just all of the stuff.
Yeah, I will have to show you. Like when I write Orthway lists, they come out looking like that. It's just all that shit.
It was just a bit of everything, really. They had Black Templars, which obviously Lee knows quite well. They had Guard with a Bane Blade.
Yeah, I love that.
And then they had Iron Warriors with Lord of Skulls, 2 Land Raiders, 3 Venom Crawlers, and some troops. And we all stood there.
You mean some troops, don't you?
Yeah. We were like, do any of us want to play into that? Like, what?
There's a sort of fear that comes with, like, it's so weird. I don't know what the hell is going on.
So, pairings process, we led with Tom. Because we felt it was the right option, and also because we hadn't led with Tom before.
Yeah, we were up for trying that, and I was up for having some choice. So I quite like most of these. Yeah.
Yeah, and they put in Eldari and I can't remember what. But anyway, the pairings process kind of worked out quite nicely, I think, in the end.
Yeah, it was good. I'm always keen for Eldar because I have a very good record.
Yeah, so we had Jakari into Craft World, so Tom into the Craft World. We had they had put down the Imperial Guard, and we had Paul into the Imperial Guard.
Paul got the Imperial Guard, yeah.
I got the Iron Warriors, so I got to try and kill the big stuff, which I know I don't do if it's Knights, but could I do it against the Iron Warriors? And then that meant Lee got Black Templars, which was really interesting because Lee was like, I want Black Templars. And the Black Templars guy was like, I want the Thousand Suns.
Yeah, it was really interesting, wasn't it?
So that's quite cool. Both players going thinking they want to play that particular matchup. That's quite interesting, I think.
And Lee and I both got to play against armies that we own and use.
Which,
that was a nice added layer underneath. Because I think Craftworld's guy was quite happy to have Jakari as well.
Yeah, exactly. So we were there, and the only guy that wasn't happy was the Iron Warriors guy.
Can't imagine why.
It turned out he was right. So I'll talk through my game quite quickly.
Yeah, do it.
I was against Simon, genuinely lovely guy.
Yeah, he was. He was great.
But I'd say not a particularly common tournament goer, maybe.
No.
And after my first turn, it was very evident that this wasn't really going to be a game, simply because he could not hold any primary. It was the one scouring where you strategic scan your objectives, and he was using his Land Raiders to do that, which is never ideal. He basically couldn't hold any objectives because I could just go over and take them off him. He scored 0 primary the entire game. The only primary he scored was the strategic scan points. His secondary choices were Bring It Down, No Prisoners, and Behind Enemy Lines. That's how screwed he was.
Yeah.
Turn 2, he scanned the middle objective with his Lord of Skulls.
600 point strategic scan.
Action Monkey. It was just really hard for him. Didn't help. He failed miserably with a lot of his saves, but my army just plays that particular mission quite well in a lot of circumstances because I just ran pretty much everything down one flank. I left a little bit on the other side to deal with a on-rushing Rhino and just kept stealing his objectives and blowing stuff up. And we had this one cool moment. So I've killed pretty much everything, but there's a Lord of Skulls, turn 4, is on 3 wounds. Yeah. I was like, right, this is going to be so cool. So I charged in my Troop Master. Yeah. Troop Master's 3 damage, and I had this visual moment of the Troop Master bounding up the back of the Lord of Skulls,
Legolas style, right?
Jumping up and boom in the eye, and just whiffed like fuck and did absolutely nothing. And then Lord of Skulls just went boom straight down and obliterated the Troop Master in one. I was like, it would have been so cool.
It would have been.
So it was.
There's something satisfying about the little elf getting ruined as well. It's always fun.
It would have been so warm. I genuinely just assumed it was going to happen because it would look so cool. I just assumed it would go. It seemed fake.
Because he's T8, right? The Lord of Skulls. Is he T8?
Yeah.
So the Troop Master's wounding on 6s, right?
No, because he's got Chegarat's Rose.
Oh, he's got the Rose. Okay. No, he does have a chance, but he can't re-roll the wounds. He can't do that, right? Against
failed. It should be. It's only AP2, unfortunately.
Yeah, no.
97-21. It was quite a brutal game. So I then got to eat my lunch on time, unlike in the previous day. So I got all the nice Subway stuff.
Yeah, that's good.
Nice.
And then I came over feeling, everyone else must be doing really well. And came over to 3 very sweaty men who were all like,
Yeah.
Games. I was like,
we didn't really know. We didn't know how you were getting on, and it was good when we knew that you had one.
Yeah, I felt better when you said that.
Our whole row had a real day, didn't we? We had a real time.
Every single one of you were like, I went over and I looked at Paul and he was like 5 points up, but didn't really have much left on the board.
Yeah.
Lee was like,
I think Lee thought he had
going
it.
to be very close.
That's the thing. If I jump right into my game at that point, so I
love teams for moments like that. By the way,
Yeah.
isn't that fucking brilliant? When you've just got the whole row. It's like, you're in it together. You're all scrapping.
It is a lot of fun like that.
It's super cool.
So yeah, I think at one point, Chris, you might have come over, or Tom, or someone looked at me, and I was like, I probably gave them the real smug. Yeah, I've got this.
You 100% early doors were like, this guy is fucked. not in those words, but you gave me a look that when you give me that kind of look, I tend to assume.
Yeah, and I thought he was, and so did he.
Yeah,
so he could not. He was a good player. Don't get me wrong, he was a good player. He could not roll dice to save his life. Like I've never seen dice running quite so poor as this. And then he did make quite a mistake in turn 1 in that he pushed to the middle, and he had the Tannhauser Bones Chaplain on bike, so it can only take 1. Every damage is reduced to 1. I don't care about that because all my damage is 1, or it's mortal wounds, and they all count as 1, sort of applied however many times. So I immediately obliterate him with a cacophony of sort of mortal wounds and shooting and stuff like that, because he is close enough to me actually. And then I launch all my spawn into the middle, and they're fully buffed up. And they take out something else. I can't remember what exactly. And then in his turn, he has his entire army shoot at them. So that's I think 2 Redemptors that can see, 3 or 4 Eradicators, all the bolt pistols and the heavy bolt pistols and intercessors and everything else. And after everything, I've got 2 spawn left. I just could not fail a 4-up. And at that point, I was like, I'm going into my turn 3, I think, at this point. I'm like, well, I've completely got the board and everything. And I make a really, really catastrophic mistake. And I remember I caught myself at the time. I was like, for fuck's sake, why have I done that? And what I'd done is I'd been slingshotting Araman the entire game, coming out, doing 10 mortal wounds or so, slotting back away and hiding.
Pissing off again.
And this time, I'd forgotten to piss off. I just left him out in the middle of nowhere, which was pretty tragic. So I was like, oh God, I don't know what to do here. He's got sort of 5 blade guard 4 inches away, going into his turn. He can't shoot him because he is right next to some Terminators, so he's covered by Lookout Sir. And obviously at that point, I'm like, oh God, I've going to have to do something to commit to this. So I end up just slinging Magnus around the other side, to be like, okay, well, if you're going to, let's just try and split your attention, because I don't think you've got enough to kill Magnus in one go, but you do have enough to kill Araman. So if I can take the pressure onto Magnus and then heal him back up in my turn, then all might be fine. So Magnus comes out, kills a Dreadnought, and then in return takes all the Eradicators to the face and immediately dies.
Ouch.
Because I had actually forgotten that he had the Master Apothecary, so I think he brought 2 back, and hadn't considered that was an option. Yeah. But what it did do, I was actually very pleased with one thing I did do in this game. So there's a stratagem for Thousand Suns. If you charge a character and you've got Thousand Suns rubrics or Terminators within, I can't remember how far it is, within range of that character that's charged, you can heroically intervene 2d6 inches. So he charged all these Blade Guard into Araman. So I heroically into my Terminators 12 inches, come all the way around the Blade Guard and base them. So only one can attack Araman.
That's so good.
So it does keep him alive, and I was really pleased with that play.
I hate that strat. I remember that very well. It's horrible.
So ultimately what happened was that because I lost Magnus, I was completely out of position. I went from a position of strength to a position of weakness, and ended up as a draw. That I definitely should have won. So he was a great player, though. He was at real risk of going on the tilt. for a little while.
And, I could sense that early doors.
And he did apologise to me and sort of said, "I'm sorry, I'm salty. Like it's when things aren't going your way, and I do know how that goes.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of he was surprised as I was that he was able to sort of bring it back in the way that he did. So fair play to him.
Do you think you needed to sacrifice Magnus?
No.
So if you had just left Magnus, where he was, would you have been better position than what happened?
Well, I think that
Araman is very, very important, though, isn't he?
Those all the changes in reflection is that those Eradicators shoot into the Terminators. So they probably kill 4 Terminators, which would have still given me enough to do what I needed to do and protect Araman and stuff as well. So it was the wrong decision.
Yeah. So we got a draw.
The wrong decision was bringing Magnus. But...
No, we love Magnus. Paul played against Guard with a ton of tanks and a Baneblade. There was a big frickin' Baneblade. And this was hilarious, again, to be on the row, because I looked over at the start of the game. The Baneblade's gone all the way up the flank really quick. Like, the guy is throwing this thing. Yeah. It is absolutely running at Paul. And I go back in the game and look over, and I wonder how Paul's getting on. The Baneblade is still there. It is still on the flank. I don't think for Paul to be in this game, I was like, I don't think the Baneblade should still be there. I think Paul very much wants that not to be around by this point. But as it was, I think Paul had got killed the shit out of, but had done in his very Paul way, had played mission super well with his Obsec Terminators and had choked the guy out. And he did get the win, I think, didn't he?
He did.
Yeah, he won really comfortably. Won 17-3.
Won really comfortably. So although it looked scary in a couple of places.
5 models left at the end. And just all 1 and 2 man spread around the board. The guy had taken Engage, I think, and that's a terrible choice.
Yeah, that would explain why the Baneblade was trying to yeet up the side. So that was a good job for Paul. And I had Dean. Dean was feeling slightly unwell. And as I say, Dean had a craft warriors list that I really liked. It was Aspect Warriors, it was 2 Falcon, it was Wave Serpents, and it was Eldrad and 2 Farseers. It gone with the Farseers on foot, which I can see in light of the points changes for Eldrad. I can see why you would do this, because you need to save those points, and that's freeing up like 90 points almost, or not far off, to have them all on foot. But it did mean that for Dean, his little sort of spell castle was slightly less mobile and slightly less nippy than perhaps it could otherwise be. In this one, Dean goes first. I've played Drakari Craftworks a few times, and I know full well that what you have to do is you have to run at them really quickly, and you have to punch them repeatedly in the dick until they can't do anything else. Because if you just sort of play little bitty I go you go, they just gun you to death, psychic you to death. They've got more stuff. They're better at range. But Dean went first, so he dropped a Falcon down, managed to get a beat on one of my raiders, killed one of my raiders at the back, and took up some quite nice positions in the sort of mid-board. And then my mad rush to try and get all the elves began. So I got some raiders up the board. I positioned the Grotesque to do some sort of late mid-game charging and getting involved later. And I knew that his turn 2 was really going to hurt, because I kind of had to basically just take one punch in the face, and then I was going to get to do what I did. And we were talking about it because we both play elves and we knew the matchup quite well. And we were talking. It's a really fun game, Drakari Craftworks, because it's got this proper cat mouse thing. Because anything that gets to do what it wants to do kills the thing it's trying to kill, right? So. And I was having a rough time with the Dark Lances on the Fate dice because he was constantly getting 2 saves every time. So he had 2 6s lined up, and I'm firing my 3 Dark Lances knowing that, functionally it's not going to happen. And I'm going to have to really put a lot of Dark Lances to get anything done. And he demechs me, destroys my vehicles in his 2, picks up all of the Blood Brides, but not the Succubus, who is sort of nestled behind them. And Draz and some Incubi fall out and some Racks fall out, and his Shining Spears commit to killing some, and he's committed them too early, I think, actually. The Shining Spears come in and clean up some Racks that have fallen out of a transport, but are now looking down the barrel of Drazar and his mates. So then he's had a good turn, he's killed lots of my stuff. A guy comes over at this point and is like, oh, how's it going? And he's like, oh, are these the casualties? And Dean's like, no, those are his casualties. There's a falcon on the side, but it's Dean's other falcon that hasn't come in yet. So I've got all these bodies along the side. I haven't scratched him yet. I think I punked 5 swooping hawks in my first turn. That was it. Although I was glad to get rid of them. So I've got this enormous body count. Like I reckon 500 points is gone before I get to do anything to him. But then I have a big turn, and everywhere, we kill Eldrad with Drazar, we kill all the Shining Spears with Grotesques and Incubi, we kill another Farseer with the Succubus, and the Eldar list struggles once it gets tied up and gummed up with bodies and Incubi, and things are getting tagged. He's running out of psychic powers. And in terms of the secondary game, he's now struggling to get out and around me to achieve the things he wants to do for his scoring. So he gets in a headlock from there on out. And so it's a really good game. And if he'd killed a little bit more stuff and positioned a little bit differently in terms of when his Shuriken and when his Shining Spears went in, I think I could have not quite had enough stuff to roll them through, but as it was, I did. And so I love that matchup. It's really fun. I enjoy making the Craftforge machine breakdown. So it was, but Dean was very good and took it very well, even though he wasn't feeling particularly well on the day. So thanks, Dean.
Good work, everybody.
Yeah,
a win. We're 2-2.
We're 2-2.
Hunting down that 3-2.
Oh, 3-2.
We're feeling confident. We've got the pairing
so
system
confident.
sorted.
We figured it out at this point, haven't we?
What chomps are we going to beat next? Just give us some middle tier ponies who we can hunt down. So that was really nice when we saw we were lined up against Team Ironbrew.
Team Ironbrew, yeah.
Who as
roughly translates.
Roughly translates to WTC Scotland.
Yes. So we've been chatting with them a little bit earlier in the day, and they were there with a really good set of lists, and they'd had a rough time in their earlier matches. They'd already hit like England teams and drawn and lost into them. So they were
team
on the
that
down.
battered us turn 1, they only just lost to, didn't they?
Yes, yeah. So we knew we were in trouble. They had Innes Wilson, who, the stats on Innes Wilson since the Tyranid book came out are some reading. He has lost. I don't know if he has. I think he's lost a game. He's lost like a game since that book dropped. He has been taking out GTs left, right, and centre. He's been doing extremely well, and I know of Innes' work, and we've met before. Because he sat and observed my final game at Leicester, and we had a lot of laughs when that was going on. So I knew of Innes quite well, and I follow his content online. He's a very smart player and knows the game well. And they also had Blood Angels. They had Chaos Knights. And did they have Imperial Knights as well?
Imperial Knights.
They had Imperial Knights. So this is interesting because this seems to be how. This is the constellation of armies currently making up all the WTC teams, which is interesting. We didn't really hit Necrons, did we? We didn't see what new Necrons.
Yeah, there were a lot of Necrons there, but we didn't get them.
Yeah. How did pairings go here? I think it was.
We worked out that they would probably lead with one of the Knights armies.
Yeah.
We put down Drukhari first, and what happened was they led with Blood Angels.
Yes. Paul did speculate that they might lead with Blood Angels.
So that meant that then we put. They gave Tom the choice of Tyranids
or Chaos Knights.
Yeah. And we put Harlequins and Harlequins and Dark Angels, maybe.
Yes. Harlequins and Dark Angels. Yeah.
So the way that worked out was that their Blood Angels chose Harlequins.
Yeah.
Tom decided to fall on the
I took the hit because I think we also knew that Lee would play whatever we didn't take.
Yeah, Lee would be okay into Knights and Paul would be okay into Knights.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was the goal. We kind of, let's be face it, we weren't exactly confident of winning, but we wanted to give them a good game, and we felt that maybe our two lists could beat Knights. So if we could get wins there and losses the other way, then who knows what could happen. So
I'd had one good game against Nids earlier in the event. So I was like, I'll give it a go. I certainly know Nids pretty well. I was happy enough to try and see, and I was kind of curious and keen to play in this as well. So took the bullet on that one.
So we kind of, it was all right. I knew that Blood Angels for Harlequins is pretty horrible because Harlequins are very good at running away and Blood Angels are very good at catching them.
Yeah, there's not a lot of board left, right?
Yeah, exactly. And on this particular map, the Blood Angels can just go run into the middle and be like, you can't run away. Yeah. So I was feeling not particularly confident. Lee and Paul have a game plan where they can just sit in their deployment zone and hope it works. And then we didn't know what was going to happen. So I think we probably should start with you, Tom.
Yeah, mine's quick and easy, right? So we got
win, easy, job done.
No. So Innes's list is it's exactly like the one that Lee played in round one. It's big blocks of warriors, it's 2 harpies, and it's Leviathan. So it's very chewy and very hard to get through. And in this game, it was very straightforward. I went first. I fired 9 Dark Lancers with rerolls at a harpy and didn't kill it. I was like, that's not a good start. I think I needed to at least down one of them turn 1 to make it interesting. I'd got some other stuff into position. But then Innes sort of chucked the harpies forward, chucked the warriors forward, and was buffing up the warriors and getting them as they go. And sort of with the harpy mortal wounds and extra shooting, he was able to sort of demech the transport. Now, the warriors are actually quite a bit quicker than I necessarily anticipated, because with Onslaught, with the advance and charge, he got quite a big advance and charge, so they were able to get a bit further up the board. And that's the one thing I didn't need to do in round 1, was put raiders as far forward on that side as I did. I should have taken my time on that side. I'd already shot to Venom for engage, so there was no need for me to be that far forwards on that flank. But I was trying to force Innes to play the game in that back quarter of his rather than in my back quarters where I had nothing. Harpy didn't die. My stuff died very quickly. Warrior Brick came in and killed some stuff. I chucked basically all my combat stuff into this Warrior Brick. We've got a great photo, because I was like, just looking at it and thinking, I think it takes everything. I think the only way I drop this whole brick is if almost everything I have on that flank goes in, and it all went in. I did kill it basically by about 1 wound. I only had I literally had 2 or 3 wounds left, and that was Grotesques, 10 Incubi, Drazar, Archon. So a lot of melee output, and I think a warrior brick is 300 points.
Yeah.
So you do that, and then the way, as Innes was talking about, this is the way that it goes for a lot of lists. You kill that brick, and then the next one comes, and then that was the game, right? You get the next one comes in. He's playing the Hive Tyrant really well, picking on things and pissing off and all that stuff. And although I'm able to score some secondaries here and there, I get rolled off the board fairly straightforwardly. So it was a very funny game and very interesting to see such a brutal list played in such a sort of assertive and aggressive fashion. But I was mullered. I wouldn't. Ravagers, I think we'll talk about it later. Ravagers aren't the one. And I needed another wave of combat stuff to go into his other wave of combat stuff, and something that can chase and hunt down stuff that flies. Cool.
Yeah, so Tom's over very quickly, but had a great time.
I got to have a nice break, actually. I had a nice hour-long break.
Really. And he's walking around, and he keeps checking in with his players, and they're like predicting what the score is. And Paul's opponent is saying, I think it's probably going to be about like a 15-5 win to me, like on turn 1 or turn 2. So the problem is that this guy's never played Paul before, and he doesn't understand what is going to happen. And what's going to happen is that those Terminators that he keeps throwing his armies, his war dogs into, aren't going to die. What is going to die are the war dogs. Yeah. And the guy's getting increasingly frustrated as his plan of just, stealing stuff doesn't work. And Paul plays the game really, really well. He stays in his deployment zone for 2-3 turns, and then just gradually starts to come out as he's dealt with enough of the knights. And it ends up a draw, a 10-10 draw. And Paul actually said if he hadn't chosen Stubborn Defiance and he'd chosen Oath of Moments instead, he would have actually got the win. It was just Stubborn Defiance doesn't work against the Knights because they could just keep making him restart on the point scoring. But no, he played really, really well. So we're like, right, okay, we've lost 20-0. We've got a 10-10 there, so that's really cool, drawn against the Chaos Knights Team Scotland player. And then, speaking of hiding in your deployment zone for 3 turns, Lee.
You say 3, I think you mean 5. So I played Martin, who was sort of not part of Team Scotland, but was sort of playing with them.
He's Dutch, isn't he?
He's Dutch, exactly. He was a lovely guy. In fact,
he had a really funny manner, didn't he, Martin? I found him really funny. When I got joined into it, I was like, oh man, this guy seems really intense. Like, this is going to be really fun. I've had 4 games. I'm already dreading getting spanked by Knights. But then we start, and I'm like, he's the loveliest man. I really, really misjudged it. So it was a very terrain heavy board.
So I picked the same sort of objectives that I mentioned before. So I had ones that didn't force me to leave. So I was banners, I was interrogate, or mutate. I can't remember one of those two, and then one other psychic one. So basically, I was non-interactive playing this game. So I move, my turn one, I move on to the objectives, and I raise banners, and I mutate or interrogate, and then I don't do anything else. Everything remains hidden, completely hidden, apart from I know that his war dogs are quick enough to come and get a squad of cultists if they want to. So in his turn, he says, there's nothing I can do here. He moves forward a little bit. I was interrogate because he comes into my interrogation range at this point. Comes around, kills those cultists, and then that's it. And then in my turn, I score all the same points again. And then I kill that war dog with yo-yoing Araman out, and then sending the spawn in, I think, to finish it off. Annoyingly, actually, the spawn do leave on a wound because I forgot that they reduce damage by 1. And spawn damage 2, which is a shame. The spawn actually don't die either. They stick out in that on that objective. They get killed down to 1, and then the night goes. Turn 3 comes around, and Magnus is still hiding. All the Terminators are still hiding. He eventually sends a big knight round, kills a couple of small things, and then in return, all the mortal wounds I could possibly muster go back into it, and then both squads of Terminator shoot it down. That's turn 3. Turn 4, and I still haven't moved. Turn 4 comes, another big knight comes around. At this point, I'm like, okay, well, now if I don't move, he will just come around. He's got the double thermal cannons or whatever it was, and he'll just shoot Magnus to death. So I'll send Magnus in, try and kill the knight. So do a load of more wounds and stuff, get it down to about 15, send him into combat, leave it on 2 wounds, because on my way in, he fires Overwatch, and he's got this thing to make 6s auto wound or something like that, and then the damage becomes, it's a thermal cannon, so it's like d6 plus 4, and there's a strat to make it so that they become mortal wounds. So just like 8 mortal wounds to Magnus with like 1 thing in Overwatch. So it just brackets him down to like the middle. So he loses a couple of attacks or whatever, leaves it alive on like 2 wounds. Then Magnus dies the next turn. But ultimately, what ended up happening was I just kept scoring those points. For a game that I thought was certain to lose, that also ended up a draw. And I said to him, like, how do you think I played it? He's like, you couldn't have played it better in that sense. And I was really proud of sort of having the restraint to just sort of see that the way to get the points in that game. It was never like I was never going to win that game. I just didn't have the reach. But playing it that way and sort of eking out those points, it was quite a proud moment, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And against a good sharp player. Yes, and I'm glad you guys had a nice time, because you say when we first got there, I think they were on a bit of a down, weren't they? Because they were basically
playing a team that was
they were lower down than they wanted to be. Yeah, they were lower down than they wanted to be. They were a bit grumpy. The mood was fractious in the camp, so we were a bit like, oh god, I hope they're not going to be horrible. And then actually it was fine. They were good fun.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah.
Nice. And then the big finale, the end of all things.
Finale.
So now 2 draws and a massive loss.
Yeah. So if Chris can get a huge 20-0 win, then he can snatch the draw.
So I'm playing also Chris, who is like a really nice guy, really friendly, really kind of like strong-willed, full-on, confident, shall we say.
Very Scottish.
Very early on, he makes it very clear that this is a horrendous matchup for me, and I don't really have any chance. And which is you're already not feeling particularly great, and then you start piecing together how the game's going to go, and you're like, no, genuinely, you are right, because it's hammer and anvil. And so what he does is, obviously, I've got to try and deploy, because he can forward advance, obviously, full on Fury, the 5 Death Company of Hammers. And, they're not going to kill anything, but they're going to be able to get in and tag and stuff. At the same time, I don't want to start my entire army on the line, so I kind of have, I just try and spread my bikes out and all that sort of thing. Another issue is that once they've hit me, and there's 21 sanguinary guards sat in the mid board, and then they're going to run at me. That is
an issue, isn't it?
Turn 2, and then I just die.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, there were 5 Centurions also sat in the middle of the board waiting for anything.
They'll love it, yeah.
At least there was no objective in the middle of the board for them to be sat on. So that was, that was something. So anyway, I don't get my deployment quite right. I give him some charges, which I shouldn't have. I gave him 2 different 5-inch charges. So if I light run away one, he can just charge the other. And I'm like, if he gets a decent charge here, he's just going to get into a bunch of stuff. And although it's not the end of the world, because I can obviously fall back, etc., it just stops me from advancing. So then I'm immediately losing some of that movement.
Yeah, it slows you right down. Yeah.
So it's not ideal. He then fails his 5-inch charge. He then re-rolls it and fails it again. I'm like, right. Okay, so I'm not actually lost anything this turn. What can I do here? And I look around and I'm like, well, there's a land speeder kind of like hovering around, ready to go. And so for his secondaries, this is actually really important to the game, how the game goes. He's chosen Relentless Assault, which is 4 points for having units in my deployment zone, basically. He's gone for... I can't remember. There was one other which he scored quite well on, and he's gone for Blades of Sanguinius.
Yeah.
Now, Blades of Sanguinius is a very interesting choice. He chooses one of his characters. He chooses one of my characters. So he chooses Dante. He chooses my Troop Master. He says, if that character of yours dies, I get 5 points. If I kill him in melee, I get 5 points. If Dante's the one that kills him, I get 5 points.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, right, that's fair enough, but I don't really care about my Troop Master. Like, what does my Troop Master do? Does it even pick up one of your characters, who, again, I don't really care about? Does he pick up many Sanguinary Guard on their 3-up save against her? No, not really. So I'm like, fine, I guess that Troop Master's staying in a boat for as long as possible. So anyway, in my turn, I kind of measure out... Pick. Yeah, exactly. So in this game, I measure out all the 14 inches with where all those Sanguinary Guards can go. And then I just pick up those 5 Death Company and I pick up the Land Speeder. Eventually, they're like toughness 6-7 wounds.
Yeah, they are. They're chewy. They're chewy.
And I've sent down and fire and faded my 3 bikes down into one bottom corner of his board, basically. Another issue in this thing is obviously I'm terrified of the Sanguinary Guard just all running, because turn 2, they can just run and land pretty much on my objectives. This mission is where you get CP for holding the objectives just outside of your deployment zone. So what happens over the course of this game is basically I don't really ever have any CP until later on.
It looked, as an observer, obviously I had time to kill. As an observer, it looked really weird because it looks so weird. I was like, I don't understand how Chris can be in the game and be in so much of a corner that he is in right now. Like, stuff is like so bunched up. I mean, you've got other stuff round, haven't you? But it looked optically bizarre because it's like the Blood Angels look to have about 80% of the board.
So basically, I think on my turn, so he's wanged his Sanguinary Guard. I believe he probably gets this wrong. I had more of my stuff on one back corner than the other. He put 2 Sanguinary Guard and the Apothecary on the other flank, and then 1 into the one with all the stuff. He makes his charge with the 1 on all the stuff and kills 3 bikes. Big whoop. And I light fall back from the other 2 blobs. So this means that he's now got 7 Sanguinary Guard just sat on this objective, or sat in my home ruin, in my backfield, sat on basically a 1-up save, and he's like, come on then. Right, okay, so as you say, when you looked over, I essentially had 4 Star Wars in my...
It's like when the wagons are drawn, like all circled up, like in a corner. Like.
It was hilarious. I was like, well, I'm going to try and kill these 7, and that's basically it. Meanwhile, I've dropped a unit into his corners for R&D. My 3 bikes haven't died to the 5 assault intercessors who've tried to kill him, so they've run off and they're going to go deal with something holding his backfield objective. He's got the Sanguinor in Deep Strike ready to come down in Heroic if I charge, so unfortunately I can't charge and steal his home objective. My shooting doesn't quite do the job. But I clear up those 7, and then we rinse and repeat. I've measured out where he's going to land to, so the next, all the Sanguinary Guard pile onto my home field objective. Thankfully, the Centurions have an 8-inch charge by moving through difficult terrains, they fail onto my objective where all my stuff is, which makes life a lot easier. And he says, go. And at this point, I'm now properly hemmed in a corner, and as he's cut the angle down, so I'm now really struggling to kind of fall away. So this is like where I have to go a bit for broke. I have to move some stuff across to just try and get away, and I have to send some stuff across to try and kill one of the units of Sanguinary Guard. Sanguinary Guard are quite scary because for my fusions, because my fusions have a 6-inch range, he has a 6-inch heroic. So I have to position myself so I'm out of 6 inches of one of the units, but inside 6 of the other, and just try and blap it. But to blap it, I've got the Shadow Seer, the Death Jester Mortals, and then only 2 boats worth of Neuros and Fusion and that. So it's really risky. Then my Shadow Seer fails all of the powers, and I'm like, oh no, this isn't going to go well. And you just feel like you've worked so hard for a moment, and then all of a sudden you've had to take a bit of a risk, and it's going to go. It felt like that. As it was, because the Sanguinary Guard are only 7s, I actually almost manage it, and I leave 1 Sanguinary on 1 wound. So obviously it's quite annoying because it can then heroic into my Star Weavers. I mean, it doesn't do anything, it's not the end of the world. He then makes his morale, and that's quite frustrating because it costs me some points. I can't remember why. It costs me 3 points. Oh yeah, it gives him grind them down. That was his other secondary, grind them down. And also it stops me from getting a kill point for the mission. And I'm like, oh, okay, not great. Anyway, the rest of the game is kind of him chasing me. As I'm at that point, I'm like, I kind of given up on killing stuff, and I'm now just running away down the board. And he's just chipping away. And we get right to the end, and I've asked him, I'm like, so your Blades of Sanguinius, if a vehicle dies and I just roll a 1 and I just kill my troop master, how many points do you get? He's like, well, I'd only get 5. I'm like, interesting. He then killed the Star Weaver, and I'm like, right, well, I think I'm a bit screwed here. So I think I'll just kill the troop master. So I roll my 6 dice and I don't roll a 1.
Yeah, of course, like, the one time you need
I'm
it.
Like, damn. Okay, fine. Anyway, the way it plays out is actually I am able to escape. He's not quite able to get to me because of the way I've positioned. The next turn, he fires his Las Fusils in and kills the Star Weaver it's in. And if I get out, all of the Centurions are just going to hurricane away and
that's all you want.
Die. And then I measure it out. And I'm like, emergency disembark, and I can actually get him to safety.
Love that.
I did that move.
That is good play, Chris. Well done.
I managed to survive. And the way it had worked is I'd managed to kill enough stuff that actually I'd started to catch up on points. And as the dust settled, I lost 79-74, simply because he scored a 0 on Blades of Sanguinius. I had scored like 20-25 primary the entire game. And obviously it caps eventually, doesn't it? There's only so many objectives you can only hit 45. Net-wise, he probably scored like 60 primary. But actually didn't really matter. And that was just like really, really satisfying. Again, in a tournament, you've sweated your ass off. It's 1v1 and you've lost anyway. But in this context, I was desperate to try and get out of that draw. And he was very complimentary. He said, he's like, that's the best I've seen a Harlequins player play the game. You couldn't play it any better, etc., etc. So I was really... Don't get me wrong, he makes that charge turn 1, it's slightly different. He doesn't choose Blades of Sanguinius, it's slightly different. He put 14 Sanguinary Guard into all of my stuff, and he probably didn't quite get it right. You can see there was a bit...
perhaps he slightly underestimated the matchup a little bit.
He'd been confident he was going to win, but you have to make the most of what you're...
Absolutely.
And you play what's in front of you.
You took advantage of all of those things and played it really, really well. And the emergency disembark is great. They almost should have just put that stratagem in elf books. It never turns up anywhere else. It's great. But it's so good. Used at the right times. People just never quite get the angle right. And then you're like, oh, we're out of there. We're out of trouble.
If I didn't have the runaway strat for light, that game is unwinnable.
Oh my lord! You get absolutely brutalized, don't you? That strat is so good, so good, so worthy of being vected.
There we were. So we actually went 10-10, 10-10, 10-10, 0-20, which overall was, Tom never stood a chance in that game, so that's
whoever went in that was losing.
Yeah, someone was getting fucked.
He took it for us to give us a chance, and we got a really satisfying.
I think
games,
it was a really good end to the weekend because I really enjoyed chatting to and playing Innis, and so I got a lot out of that, and it was great to see everybody commend just to give such a good account of themselves against
it felt great,
national players and the kinds of people who are in really tough circles in terms of list writing and design and army choices and you were playing meta lists as well, and you all did great. So I think that was awesome. And so it was a very morale raising end to our weekend.
We needed that, didn't we?
We did.
So it
was a good showing, and that was us. And we were 2-3. I think, as we talked about, probably the game with the matchups with the Harlequins and the Demons end of Saturday. Was it end? Yeah, it was end of Saturday. That was the game we reckon with a slightly different set of pairings we might have been able to get that 3-2. I think we were fairly content otherwise, and we like the level that we're at, don't we? It's a nice level.
It was a lot of fun. I would definitely. I've heard people talk about teams events a lot. I was like, fine.
Are you sold on the format?
I'm absolutely sold on it. Yeah, absolutely sold on it.
Everyone's the same. Everyone's sort of like, I'm sure it's not actually that great, and then they play it, and they're like, this is the best way to play.
It's the camaraderie, isn't it? It's the camaraderie.
Yeah, you're in it together. You're in the trenches.
Yeah, and you meet more people and chat to more people as well, because there's you're meeting whole teams of people, which is quite fun. And the pairing system adds the drama, and it's very, very nice.
So if you can find if you're hosting a team event out there, give us a shout. We'd love to come along.
Yeah, we'll get involved. We're very keen. I think that's a sensible place to end it. We've chatted for ages, so I think that's good. We'll be back before too long with some more pontificating for you. But in the meantime, stay hydrated out there. Look after yourselves, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.